With a new year, we have to always add. We only go up. If you don't go up, you're going down, just like a car. If you park a car and you don't use it, it's not just going to stay the way it always is. Everything starts slowly falling apart. During the summer, I think some of you, a bunch of you know, Mushki helped direct the Chabad teen camp up north. So for 3 weeks, we didn't use one of our vehicles. And I come back, and all of a sudden you hear the grinding and the brakes and this. 3 weeks, that's it. So what's the message, especially a message for the new year? That a Jew has to always be growing. If you don't grow, there's no such thing as status quo. A living thing is only going up or down. If you don't go up and you feel it, you start slipping and you start losing steam. And so we're back, and we're going to keep the Tanya classes consistent. We're moving into Mondays, and we're going to keep on going every week, besides if it's a holiday, a Jewish holiday, that is, right? Depending on the other holidays. We won't be breaking for the Monday of Halloween. That much I'll tell you. Okay. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Up to date, we have had 13 classes on Tanya. We took a little break over the summer, and it's been a few weeks, been a few months since we were studying. And even for those who've come to all the classes, I think we could all use a little review. And there are, especially for those who maybe have missed some of the classes, this is the chance to really come back up the pace, to kind of get the momentum back going. What we're going to be doing today is we're not going to be learning any further. We are holding towards the end of chapter 4. We didn't quite end chapter 4, but we're the most way through chapter 4. We're going to be today reviewing from the beginning through chapter 4, getting a general view of Tanya. And this will help those who are new, who have missed, and it will just be a good refresher. I think we could all use a good refresher from the beginning. I'll just tell you, Friday, shortly before Shabbos, I got an email from a guy who lives in Texas. His name is David. He said that he found the Tanya classes online on Spotify, and he's listened to all 13 classes. Now his question is, what's happening? Are you planning on continuing the series? So we've even got fans down in Texas, and I've gotten feedback from strangers from a Jew in San Francisco. And yeah, this Tanya class, he's found it on YouTube, as well as a Israeli businessman who lives now in Hollisdale, right? Hollisdale, Florida. Hollisdale or Hollandale? Hollandale, Florida, right? It's called Hollandale, right? Yeah, okay. So it's that's wonderful. So this is gonna be an opportunity. This is review from the beginning through chapter 4, right? I put them online, not so much because I don't envision of them really getting out there. I don't publicize them much. I put them online mainly so that everybody here could catch up on the classes. People want to have the recordings, but it gets out there. So that's wonderful. We're all part of something a little bit larger than just something small like this. We're going to be going through Tanya. Let's begin from the beginning, and in the next 50 minutes, from chapter 1 through chapter 4. I'll tell you a little note on the way we're studying Tanya. Tanya is a pretty small book. It really is not that big. It's much bigger than you think it is, quality-wise, but in quantity, Tanya only goes up to, I'm looking over here. This is really the Tanya that we study, which is not that many pages. What we call the Tanya, 53 chapters of Tanya, the book of the Beinoni, this is what it is. But it's unbelievably dense, and it's so rich, so rich. You could learn it on a very simple level, and you could also spend a lifetime, on any page, on any one page. It's unbelievable. I just saw a story. The guy who the story happened to, his nephew sent me the story on WhatsApp. His uncle was a teenager, or maybe like maybe a young man, young 20s, And he went to the Rebbe. He had a meeting with the Rebbe. He told the Rebbe that he wants to learn Chassidus. So what should I learn? I've never studied any Chassidus before. So Rebbe told him to learn Tanya. So he learned Tanya, and he comes back to the Rebbe a few weeks later and says, Rebbe, I've tried learning Tanya. I don't understand a word. So the Rebbe told him, okay. The Rebbe gave him another book suggestion. Learn another Hasidic text. He comes back, he says, I've studied Tanya, I've studied this other text you've given me. I just don't understand anything. So Rebbe told him like this. You definitely understood something. So if so, you're just like all of us. Everybody only understands a little bit. Nobody ever really understands the whole thing. Which is, I think, a very important attitude to studying Tanya. Sometimes we're learning it, and you could feel how deep it is and how heavy it is. And we have to realize, just, we're not here to understand everything. We're here to study it to a point that it could be meaningful to us, that the concepts will talk to us. We don't have to understand everything. And I'll just tell you on a personal level, I teach Tanya. I love Tanya. I don't understand everything. I'm not a professional. I'm a real student of Tanya. I'm always studying and learning new things. And I know that I have a lot to learn, and that's fine. That's really the attitude. The Alter Rebbe's great-grandson, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, which was an unbelievable mystic. He's known as the Maimonides of Hasidic mysticism. That what Maimonides did to Jewish law and Jewish philosophy, that's what the Rebbe Rashab did to the world of Kabbalah. Unbelievable mind. He said Tanya is a book that even the youngest child can understand the concepts, and even the greatest mystic really has no clue what's happening there. That's the paradox, right? Even a young child, and I'll tell you, as I teach concepts to my Mendel, and even to my Shana, I'm starting to have Tanya. You make it bite-sized, a little message. You speak a little bit about the soul, about internal struggles, and anybody could get it. Very simple concepts. But the depth always, there's no end to it, which is true of all of Torah. So, what's my point here? And the style of our class is generally, I don't like going too fast. I also don't want to go too slow. If you go too slow, you're stalling, and then you lose momentum. I like going on a nice pace, but I don't like, I don't just rush. I don't read a chapter a day. I feel it'll just be very overwhelming, and if it's too overwhelming, then it can start getting a little bit underwhelming as well. Just, just the meaning of it, the meat and potatoes doesn't, you're not giving it space to emerge. At the same time, and this is, Tanya is a system. It's not just a book. It's not an encyclopedia, right? A Wikipedia, the website Wikipedia, or like the olden days, right? Do you have a set of the Britannica or whatever? My
parents had a set from 1950.
All of our parents had sets, right?
So it's very useful.
Right. Okay. So that book you could read, and it's okay if by the time you made it to the letter B, you have no clue what happened in the letter A. You forgot it all. In Tanya, it's a system. So it's very important to remember the context. And because of that, we always run the risk of missing the forest for the trees. We get so caught up in the trees that we don't see the whole forest. In the context of Tanya, we did 13 classes, and it just sounds like a bunch of random information, but we're not seeing the direction. We're not seeing the larger picture. So today, the goal is to not focus on the trees, just on the forest. Let's kind of observe the lay of the land. So Tanya, what it really begins is, Tanya is a practical guide for spiritual life. So it's not a book of Jewish philosophy, although there's lots of Jewish philosophy there. It's not even a book of Jewish mysticism. It is a book of Jewish mysticism, but that's not its point. It's not a primer on Kabbalah. It's not a primer on mysticism. It's a primer on your life. It's not a book of ideas. It's a book about people. And the stated goal by the author is this is a book to give you every answer to every question you'll ever face in your spiritual journey, which is a beautiful statement. Here is literally the user's manual of life. Right? It's not going to tell you what to do about a leaky sink, but if you got any spiritual leaks, we could diagnose that here. And in general, what does it mean to live a spiritual life? To live a spiritual life means to live a life when you are in touch with your soul and trying to live through your soul. Because we all have a body, we all understand we all have bodily functions, bodily drive, bodily instincts, and we also have the world of the spirit, the world of the soul. And in our world, the natural challenge of humanity, and we all share this challenge, is that the needs of the soul get lost in the noise. The world is just such a life, physical life is so demanding and taxing and so present that the spiritual need simply gets lost. So the goal of a Jew, the work of a Jew, is to lead a life where the spirit is also present in our consciousness. But that's a challenge. It's a growth. It's a journey. The Tanya is there to walk us through that journey. And with that, chapter 1, the Alter Rebbe says, look, before anything, what we got to do is, I have to teach you a little bit about your own spiritual identity, your own spiritual anatomy. Just last Sunday, 9/11, I was in Lansing. I visited the Kabbalah of MSU, and I met there just one of the college kids were hanging around there. So I asked him what he's studying here in college. So he said he's studying human anatomy. So I said, oh, you want to be a doctor? He says, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor. I said, so what type of doctor do you want to be? He says, I don't know yet. Which is fine, right? But he knows he got to first know human anatomy. So you don't even need to know what you want to do later on in life. You want to be a surgeon? You want to be a dentist? Right? Whatever you want to be, But you need to know gross anatomy as it's called. So the Tanya does something very, very similar. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, right? And just to kind of get a little bit of context, Tanya is first printed in the year 1796. Right? So it's a little bit shy of 250 years old, 230 years old, something like that. And the Alter Rebbe was the founder of the Chabad movement, and the great grandfather of the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. His name was Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. Liadi because that's where he was a rabbi. Liadi, that's the city. Today that city is in Belarus. It used to be called White Russia. Polina was the one who told me that Belarus means White Russia. Bela is white and Rus is Russia. All right, so that's where Liadi is. So the Alter Rebbe says, I want to first teach you gross anatomy before I give you any advice. I just want to tell you, advice doesn't begin until chapter 9. From chapter 1 through 8, we are simply laying down the foundation, the concepts. We're learning simply about our inner anatomy, our inner structure. Alter Rebbe says, first thing you got to know is every single Jew, regardless of his spiritual standing, which means this is not, you don't have to be a big saint for this to apply to you. It's true of every single Jew. Man, woman, child. Every Jew has two souls, not one soul, two souls. We all, I think it's kind of common belief that we all possess a soul, but two souls, that's a big idea. And that also makes life a little bit confusing. You don't have one, if you had one soul, life is very simple. You have one soul. Two souls means you have two identities. And a soul, we have to realize what a soul means. A soul means everything. A soul is a full human being. I know it's a little bit morbid to put it this way, but this is literally the way to put it. The difference between a living body and a dead body is the soul, all right? Because the body is exactly the same, living and dead. So everything of life, the way we think, the way we speak, the way we tick, that is a soul. Life is a soul. Life is not a body. A body is simply the trapping, the physical toolbox that a soul could use, that a soul uses, a soul lives within. A soul is a full life. We are our soul more than we are our body. But the funny thing is, we don't have one soul, we have two souls. There are literally two yous. There are two Rabbi Dubovs. There's no, which makes life very confusing. And I wonder what a psychologist would say about that. We have a double identity. We don't have a split identity. We literally have a double identity. And I'm foreshadowing right now, but this is going to be a big theme in Tanya. What does that mean? That these internal struggles, that we could want two opposite things at once. One day, this, right? Let's just leave it vague. Something pulls us tremendously. The next day, the exact opposite. What's detrimental to that pulls us. And life sometimes feels like this constant roller coaster, ups and downs. Who am I? Who's the real me? What do I really want? I'm not sure what I really want. And the answer is, this is the human condition, right? You're not crazy. This is very normal. There's two yous. So we have to kind of start learning and identifying within ourselves these two identities, these two souls. What are these two souls? Soul number one is called the animal soul. Or another word we could call it, the author of it, the Tanya gives it two definitions, two titles, either animal soul or the natural soul. Natural soul. What is the identity of this soul? This soul is actually the easier soul to understand. This is the soul which is very down to earth. It's the primal instinct, right? Is that the correct term? Primal instinct for survival, for pleasure, for self-perpetuation. It's very natural. Or another, we call it an animal soul, not because it's the soul of an animal. It's a uniquely human soul. But whatever kind of makes an animal be an animal, that's this soul. Well, like, an animal wakes up in the morning. What's its agenda? Eat, sleep, procreate. Yeah. A little bit of fun in between. I don't know. There's not much to life. Survive, don't get eaten. Try to eat somebody else. There's not much to life. Right. Or in other words, what defines an animal? Sheer self-obsession. We're not saying that in a nasty way. It's not nefarious, right? Animals are not bad. They're not evil. It just is. It's just very self-obsessed. It does whatever it instinctively is wired to do, which is very, very self-absorbed. Animals do not have any sense of, let's do something for the wider good. Let's save the climate, right? Like, an animal is just very, very self-obsessed, self-absorbed, and that's its whole worldview. Survival, pleasure, perpetuation, I think that's kind of it. What does this look like within us? The exact same thing. Whenever we're very self-absorbed, which is exactly the way we're wired to be as human beings, the very moment a baby is born, and it's a wonder to watch it. Nobody has to teach a baby. They know how to cry when they're hungry. They know how to kvetch when they want to go to sleep. They everything's about themselves. That's the animal soul. So the animal soul is very, very natural. It's the human condition. This is a very easy soul to identify. We call it the animal soul. We also call it the natural soul because literally that's, everything within nature is just simply looking to survive. Anything that has any biological life in it shares these common denominators. It's looking to survive, looking to self-perpetuate. That's it. And once what it feels is good for it, it gravitates to that. So the animal soul, what does it enjoy? It enjoys a good slice of pizza. It enjoys money. It enjoys what money could buy. It enjoys a new car. That's it. It enjoys the pleasures of life. It goes away from the things that make it uncomfortable. Very self-centered, not a very big visionary. That's it. Now, I think it's very, very important to establish here. The animal soul that we all have within the Jew, within the human, is not bad, is not evil. Some people think like, oh, it's the ego, self-obsessed, self-absorbed. Oh, it's bad, it's evil. No, the animal soul is not at all evil. It's just simply self-obsessed. And therefore, it's not evil. It has some good parts to it. It has some bad parts to it. So let's talk about some bad stuff. The animal soul is the soul within us that creates a sense of haughtiness. Or we're too arrogant. And an overinflated ego. Okay, that's a very typical animal soul trait. Laziness. Depression. I don't mean clinical depression. I mean like melancholy, just like getting too self-absorbed in your own sorrows and your own bad news. This is all animal soul. Very self-obsessed, very and it has a lot of natural weaknesses that all stem from an ego. The ego is the source of all these traits. But the animal soul is also capable of doing a lot of good. It can be kind. You know why? Because people sometimes enjoy kindness. I like being kind. A lot of people volunteer because it's just such a pleasure. So it feels so good. It feels so good. So you could eat an ice cream and it makes you feel very good. And you could volunteer and you feel very good. What's the only difference? That volunteering actually did some good in the world. The ice cream didn't do any good in the world. So the animal soul is very capable of doing a lot of good. It could give charity. It could give millions to charity because it feels good. But they all share the exact same experience. It's coming from your own sense of ego. What do I want? What do I like? What is in my best interest right now? If somebody enjoys volunteering and then for some reason the volunteering goes sour, what do? Okay, I'm out. I'll find somewhere else to volunteer. What do I like? What don't I like? Again, I'm not saying that's bad. We're just trying to kind of identify within ourselves which soul is what. That's the animal soul. Sounds good? Let's now move on to soul number 2. Soul number 2 is where things get a little bit more interesting. The second soul is called the G-dly Soul, the divine soul. And Tanya says it quite simply, that God put a piece of himself into every single Jew. And it's not just a spark of God, it's a whole different soul. It's a full life. Thoughts, emotions, personality, instincts, which is just a whole different life, right? This is the you number 2. This is Rabbi Dubov number 2. There's Rabbi Dubov number 1, there's Rabbi Dubov number 2. And again, I'm foreshadowing right now, but the Alter is going to tell us that we can never be both people at the same time. Life is always about choosing which soul is going to embody your body at this present moment. And you could switch on and off very quickly. Which set of consciousness, which set of intellect, which set of emotions, which set of actions. But there's a whole different you. The G-dly soul, what's its identity? What's its drive? What's its impulses? What makes it tick? We know what the animal soul, what gets the animal soul to tick. The moment that it feels that there's a threat to its survival, animal souls really know how to get into action real quickly, right? There's pleasure also. It just, these are the things that get it to kick. What makes the G-dly soul tick? The exact opposite. The G-dly soul has no ego. It's 100% holy. It's a piece of God. And because it's a piece of God, a pure piece of God, its world revolves around God. As simple as that. The G-dly soul simply it never even crosses its mind. What do I get out of this? Is this in my best interest? Am I going to enjoy this experience? It doesn't ask that question. It doesn't even know how to ask that question. See, that's what we have to realize about souls. Souls have these very, very, very hyper-focused identities and drives, and they don't even relate to anything else. So for example, if you'll tell the animal soul, let's talk a little bit about God. Let's talk a little bit about living a higher life. It's not that the animal soul says it sounds good, but I'm not sure if I'm interested. It doesn't even know what you're talking about. You're talking Chinese to the animal soul. God, a mitzvah. What do I get out of this? You're not talking my language. I don't even know what you're talking about. If you tell the G-dly soul, I know that we could do something good, but if you tell the G-dly soul, let's save up money because I want to buy a new iPhone 14, right? Is that the one that just came out, the 14? I want to buy an iPhone 14. We got some music going on. Okay. If you tell the G-dly soul, let's save up some money, we're going to have to make some concessions in our life, but we got to make a little bit extra shekel. And I want to buy the new iPhone 14. The G-dly soul doesn't even know what you're talking about. It's just the wrong language. It doesn't So the way to put it is the animal soul, its universe revolves around itself. Everything revolves around itself. It's a little bit of a narcissist, right? It's not really a narcissist, but a narcissist could develop from there. But it's just very, just like an animal, very self-absorbed. You know, there's a joke. It's a Russian joke, but you know, Chabad has its roots in Russia. I'm saying really the wider Russia, Ukraine mainly, Belarus is part of that. So there's a Russian joke that the Russian police one night were looking for some people. They're walking through the streets, and they meet a drunken Russian peasant who's stumbling in the streets, just coming from the bar. And they say, "Do you know this guy? You know, Mr. So-and-so?" He says, "Yeah." She says, "Do you know where he is?" He said, "He's dead." "Dead? All right. What about this guy? Do you know this guy?" He says, "Yeah, I know." He says, "You know where he is?" He says, "Yeah, he's dead." Dead? Also dead. Okay. Third guy, dead. He said, "I don't understand. Everybody's dead?" He says, "You don't understand. When I'm drinking," he said, "the entire Moscow is dead." Right? When I drink, the entire Moscow is dead. That's a sign of a real alcoholic. When I drink, the whole Moscow is dead. So what's the point? That's the animal soul's attitude. You know, everybody else is dead. I don't know. I don't care. You know, if it matters to me, then I'll be interested. If not, I couldn't care less. Just, you know. But the godly soul is the godly soul's universe revolves around God and not at all about itself. So let's give a little bit of an example for this, a little bit of an illustration before we move on going. And I'll give an example because I think it's a good example and it just shows the nuance over here. Giving charity. Does the godly soul give charity? Does that identity within you give charity? For sure. It's a mitzvah. If it's a mitzvah, if it's something that God wants of you, the godly soul is all in, right? Jumping right in. Does the animal soul give charity? Could, right? It could. Anybody say no? Animal soul could give charity. So what's the difference between when the animal soul gives charity and the godly soul gives charity? The motive. Explain. Very good. What do you mean?
The animal soul probably gives charity to show off or to be portrayed as a good person. If you do it from your own soul, you really just do that.
Very good. So you see, the animal soul will give charity, but it starts asking these types of questions. What's my money going to be used for? Do I get my name on it? Right? Do you have a program for me? Do you have a building I can get my name on? Is my donation tax deductible? Am I going to get? Okay, that's good. Could we afford it? Okay, could we afford it? That's a good question. Questions like that. Do I enjoy this charity? If I don't enjoy the charity, I'm not giving charity to it. You know why? Because it won't make me feel good. That's right. The animal soul could do a lot of good, but it's always stemming from the animal soul's ego. Do I want it? Do I like it? Do I appreciate it? Does it benefit me? And if so, I'll do it. The animal soul loves feeling good. I'm such a good guy. You know how good I am? Well, let me tell you about how good I am. So we like feeling good. We don't like feeling bad. We don't like feeling evil. We don't like feeling atrocious. So we'll do good. It's like that we feel good about ourselves. And each time we do good, we feel good again. So, you know, it's a constant cycle of making sure that we feed ourselves what makes us feel good. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not condemning that experience. I think it's a human experience. We all feel that way. We all want to, you know, we all ask those questions. But we want to identify what that experience is. That's an animal soul talking right there. The godly soul will never ask, could we afford it? It will check if it could afford it, but it's not part of the equation. It's not going to say, do I like it? Will it make me feel good? It's not even questions. Here's an important cause. It's a mitzvah to give. I'm giving. It's a mitzvah to give 10% to charity, minimum. The maximum is 20%. Yeah, 20%. And even that's not even the maximum. You could give even more than that. So according to Jewish law, it's 10% minimum, and literally the sky's the limits. The godly soul doesn't ask, 1 second, could we afford giving away 10% of our annual income? It's a lot of money. It's very difficult to give charity properly. 10% of your annual income? I need money also. I need to have what to live. And the government already takes away however many percent. So that's a bit, right? Is it 10% you have to give pre-tax, right? Gross income, or okay, right. That's a typical question. All right, that's not for now. The point is, the godly soul would give charity even if it needs that 10% for itself. I need it. I literally need it. I need it for my bills. It's a mitzvah to give charity. I'm giving charity. It's a different worldview. It has a lot more trust, the animal soul. You know, there's a God in the world that naturally trusts in God. So if it's a mitzvah for me to give charity, I don't need to worry about my financial situation. God is going to take care of me. In any case, all these types of things, you know, this is the difference between how the godly soul and how the animal soul, you know, sees life. And what we basically see here is the animal soul, the godly soul, are diametrical opposites. They are on totally different wavelengths, and they don't begin to see eye to eye. There's no overlap between their life, their worldview. The animal soul is fully self-obsessed, fully self-absorbed. Anything that's not about the self, it has no clue why you're doing it. Why? Well, why are we doing this? So even think about it this way. You know, here's a little illustration of that. There are certain mitzvahs, there are certain parts of Judaism that we enjoy. Certain things in Judaism we enjoy. It's like, what do we enjoy in Judaism? I don't know. Some people, you know, different mitzvahs talk to different people. Some mitzvahs excite us, some mitzvahs are boring and meaningless. And the mitzvahs that talk to us more, we'll do, you know, it's easier for us to jump on board with. The ones that don't talk to us, it's very hard to motivate ourselves. That's all the animal soul. The animal soul appreciates Yom Kippur because, you know, it invokes good memories. Oh, Yom Kippur, we always went as a family. By the way, bad marketing to Judaism that its number one day is Yom Kippur. You take the most unexciting day on the calendar and you make that into like the, you know, is that really your best thing to show off? Okay, whatever. All right, we're not going to talk about it. Maybe Purim should have been the most popular thing in Judaism. Maybe we would have a better time keeping our youth excited about Judaism. If you know, this is a digression, right? But kind of, what better do you expect if for most youth in America, 90% of their vision of Judaism is Yom Kippur in a synagogue with an outdated rabbi and an outdated cantor and an outdated service in an outdated language for a ridiculous amount of time.
Yes.
I'm not making fun of that part of Judaism, but when that is your whole Judaism, you know, you're not bad marketing. In any case, that was totally off topic. Okay.
And then the sermon says, you should come more often.
Oh, and then we guilt you, and then we guilt trip you on top of that. So not only you're bored out of your mind, we're also guilt tripping you while you're bored. So you're probably loving this experience and can't wait to be back next year. Okay. Well, the message is that we have to start living a more enjoyable Judaism. Okay. You know, there was once a couple, and this was an immigrant Jewish couple, which came from Europe, and they came to America, and their children are American, and this was a traditional family coming from Eastern Europe, And they were having a very difficult time transmitting any sense of joy of Judaism to their children. And they asked for a meeting with the Rebbe. And they poured out their hearts that we're failing. What's going wrong? We're not, America, the American culture is just pulling our children. We can't, it's not working to transmit Judaism over to the next generation. And the father just blurted, "Oi, es ist schwer zu sein a Yid." It's so difficult to be a Jew, which is a very old Yiddish saying. It's schwer zu sein a Yid. It's difficult to be a Jew. Schiffmans, have you heard that one? Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid, right? Right. This was a very typical thing Jews used to say. Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid. And the Rebbe right away sat and said, do your kids hear you saying that often? And they're like, yeah, kind of. And the Rebbe said, when you're always muttering in front of your kids, it's so difficult to be a Jew, no wonder that they're not that excited about assuming that identity themselves. You have to be how wonderful it is to be a Jew, how joyful it is to be a Jew, how exciting it is to be a Jew. And if your children don't see that excitement, then you can't blame them. Why do kids like baseball? Because their parents show them that it's exciting to go to baseball, even though it's the most boring sport, right? You told me that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me that. Baseball.
Golf is more boring.
Golf is more boring, right? So somebody tells you it's exciting, so you say, "Oh, it's exciting." It doesn't take much to excite a kid. Just if the parents feel it's exciting, boom, they're all in. It's as simple as that. So we sometimes have to also train our animal soul to find the excitement. So the godly soul has the excitement. It's godly soul's hook, line, and sinker. There's something good to do in the world. There's something godly to do. It doesn't live for itself. It's altruistic. It's living for a higher purpose. A godly soul sees itself as a man on a mission. I'm here to serve. I'm not here to. Okay. So we have these two souls: animal soul, godly soul. That takes us. That's chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 3, the Alter Rebbe says, let's start digging a little bit deeper. Let's take one soul at a time and start learning the inner workings of the soul, the inner structure of the soul, the anatomy of the soul. Because souls are things that we can't really examine in a lab, right? You can't take a soul to a mechanic. You can't bring it to a scientist. You can't bring it to an engineer to open it up, take it apart, look at all the moving pieces. So therefore, even though it's in the Western world, it's really common wisdom that we all possess a soul, right? I think the soul is a very common word in the Western world, right? I didn't watch it, but I just saw Pixar made a movie about the soul, right?
It's actually a really good movie.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So right, so can you imagine? There's even a kids movie.
It's about soul music and the soul. Yes.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
So it's about the soul, the experience of the soul.
Very much about the soul.
So it's very Western. So it's Western. Okay, so I haven't watched it, and I could safely assume that they don't have Judaism's understanding of the soul. But I tend to think that in the Western world, because I'll put it this way, we tend to kind of simplify the soul. Oh, we have a soul. It's like we make it very simplistic, very not complex, very like. Very, very simplistic, just like, okay, we just have a soul, a nice little cute fuzzy soul somewhere inside of us. And what we have to realize when you start learning a little bit of the study of the soul, which is what we're doing over here, you realize the soul is very complex. It's a whole system. It's just as complex as a body, if not more complex, because the spirit is always more sophisticated than matter, than the physical. So let's start exploring. We right now have two souls, and we know their basic identities. We have an animal soul, very self-absorbed, the ego. We have a godly soul, the opposite. It's no ego, living for a higher purpose. It's in touch with God. It's one with God. It's a piece of God. There's a beautiful song. Maybe I'll play it for you as soon as we're done here. It's called A Small Piece of Heaven. There's a small piece of heaven in everyone's heart. A glorious piece from above, a glorious spark from above. There's actually a song made about special needs children. saying that everybody has that precious piece of heaven. We just need to cultivate it. We have to all work to allow each other's small piece from heaven to shine. It's a wonderful song. Okay, if you want, I'll share it with you. If you guys want to encore in 15 minutes. Okay. Where are we going with all this? The Alter Rebbe now then takes one soul at a time and explains to us the inner workings of the soul. So chapter 3 and chapter 4 and chapter 5 is focused on the inner anatomy of the godly soul. In chapter 6, 7, and 8, we're not there yet. We're going to be learning about the inner anatomy of the animal soul. So first godly, then animal. The godly soul, if you want to understand the internal structure of the godly soul, which again, the godly soul is something we possess. So when we're studying this, we're not studying about some theoretical concept. We really could identify these things within ourselves. The godly soul has what's called 10 soul powers. Soul powers, or the fancy word is 10 soul faculties. Faculties. 10 tools, 10 activations, 10 things the soul is capable of doing. Think about like a phone. A flip phone, how many things could it do? Let's say 7. A smartphone could do thousands. So your soul could do 10 things. That's the internal, what it's capable of. We're not going to go through all 10. The simple way to understand it is there's intellect and emotions. 3 intellectual soul powers and 7 emotional soul powers. So the godly soul is capable of learning new things, conceiving new ideas, new consciousnesses, new facts, new inspirations. It could learn them. It could identify with them. It could develop those ideas, and it could personalize those ideas. It can make those ideas meaningful, personally meaningful. That's intellect. Then there's emotions. Emotions means that the soul is capable of being emotional about those ideas. It could love based on an idea. It could hate based on an idea. It could be afraid based on an idea. It could be inspired based on an idea, etc., etc. There's 7 general categories of emotions, which those 7 capture the entire range of human emotions. It's really 7 categories. That's chapter 3. We have intellect, we have emotions. But here's the key idea. The key idea is, how does a soul develop emotions? Emotions do not exist in a vacuum. Emotions need to be created. Or in the words of Tanya, you need to give birth to your own emotions. How do you give birth to your emotions? Intellect. The intellect are the parents of our emotions. So the godly soul is capable of tremendous things for us in our life. We could be good people, not just ego-centered goodness. We could be really good people. We could be spiritual people. We could be soul-minded people. We could be people with a real relationship with God. We could be people who are truly emotionally moved by Judaism, by a mitzvah that we do, by praying. But none of these emotions are just going to come automatically. Emotions come from intellect. The godly soul is capable of learning, not just learning, but identifying with what it's learning. And it can be moved by those ideas and apply those ideas. And then it could live with those ideas with a real palpable emotional attachment to those ideas. So somebody recently told me, and this is somebody who's religious, a religious woman told this to me recently. And I don't blame her. And it's very good when people are honest. She was honest about it. She says, I hate praying. Mm-hmm. I just don't understand how to do it. I'm sitting there for an hour. I have to pray Hebrew words. And she says, I'm from, she's religious. She says, Rosh Hashanah, I don't even begin to connect to the idea of sitting in a synagogue and praying. I just hate it. And I'll just tell you, I think it's a very common problem. Prayer is not an easy thing to do. It's, did we just speak about this on Shabbos,
Yeah.
Friday night?
Yeah.
It's essentially a boring thing, which means it doesn't need to be boring. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's essentially it's very real. Real prayer is very non-stimulating. Praying is an activity that you have to get lost within yourself. It's an art to get lost for an hour within your own head, within your own thoughts, within your own soul. Especially in today's world where we're so, we don't know how to be bored in today's world, right? The second we're bored, we're like, all right, so. What should I look at? What should I watch? What should I scroll through? So prayer really is a very, very, settling activity. So it could be beautiful, but if you don't know how to be, the art of prayer, it's an art. So what's the idea? The idea is, this was a class I gave, a lunch learn I gave. So I was speaking with her a little bit about this idea. We're discussing it together. Prayer is not going to be something we appreciate automatically. It's very simple. Why? Because it doesn't really talk naturally to our animal soul. We have to develop it. And the way we develop is by studying about it. The more we study, the more we can live with these ideas. Here's another example. One of the mitzvahs in the Torah, right? There's 613 commandments of a Jew. God expects 613 things of us. Okay. A lot of expectations. Okay. One of those expectations is to love God. That's one mitzvah. Another mitzvah is to love every Jew, to love your fellow Jew. Now, right away, our sages ask, that's a weird thing to make a command about. You're commanding somebody to love? You could command somebody to do. You can't command somebody to love. Right? If your kid doesn't like school, you can't say, I command you to start loving school. It's ridiculous. So God says, I command you to love God. I command you to love a fellow Jew. Okay, I don't. I don't love my fellow Jew. What are you going to do now? So our sages say, what's this mitzvah about? So our sages say right away, the mitzvah is not on the emotion. The mitzvah is to do the things that will lead you to have that emotion. So you think you're going to wake up one day in love with God? No, right? We don't live in Disney World, right? You don't wake up one day in love. You want to love God? Study about God. Start creating, at least first on an intellectual level, a world, an understanding, a worldview about God. And our soul has within its capability that what it learns, it could personalize. And after a while, you'll start actually feeling different about God. It won't be just some weird thing. Same thing about a fellow Jew. The more you learn about what it means to have a Jewish soul, what it means to be a Jew, you start waking up and looking at a Jew a little bit differently. It's automatic. You're going to start having a different emotional attachment. And you can start having the emotion of love towards another Jew. But it all comes to, that's chapter 3. You want to create emotions? You want to change your emotions? Intellect. It begins with what you know. And not just what you know, but what you spend time on, thinking about in your brain, intellectually. We have 5 minutes left, and that takes us to chapter 4. Chapter 4 takes us to a little bit of a more peripheral layer of the soul. The internal structure of the soul is intellect and emotions. It's actually very simple. Intellect and emotions. And just to state the somewhat obvious, this is a generalization. It's like saying every single human being has a head and a torso and feet. Right? Of course, it gets more complex than that, but that's at least the generalization. That gives us at least the skeleton, the framework. Same thing, the soul, the internal structure of a soul is intellect and emotions. Then there's the outer layer of the soul. The outer layer of the soul is its behaviors. The soul is also capable of taking what it knows and taking what it feels and expressing that in its behaviors. These behaviors, the code word for these behaviors, the behaviors of the soul, in the language of Tanya, is garments, garments of the soul. the same way we put on garments and our garments help express who we are, the soul expresses who it is by its behaviors, by what it does. And the soul possesses three types of garments: thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action. This is not the inner world of the soul. These are mere expressions. They're mere behaviors of the soul. But through these garments, the soul could express itself. I love a Jew, now I could do something about it. I love God, now I can do a mitzvah. I love Judaism, now I could do a mitzvah. I'm fired up to give to the world, let me now do something about it. That's behaviors. Let me think about it, let me talk about it. All these are behaviors. And that's really where mitzvahs come in. Every mitzvah is an opportunity for the soul to express itself, to express its internal world via a behavior. And that's part of the human experience, that we can't just live in an emotional world bottled up. We would be miserable people if we had a world of emotions and we could never express it, right? Humans are wired, our souls are wired to express itself. And we're not robots. All of our behaviors are all expressions of our inner world. When we do a mitzvah, we are giving expression to our soul, to our godly soul. And last final thought, from there, the Alter Rebbe takes us into a little bit of a side, a little bit off topic, but it's important for understanding the larger context of Tanya. A mitzvah is not just a way for the soul to express itself. It is in fact the way the soul gets in touch with God. The only way for the soul to connect with God is through a mitzvah. Without a mitzvah, there's no way to be in touch with God. How do you, what's the love language? What's the relationship? What's the context of a relationship between a Jew's soul and God? It's a mitzvah. Every single mitzvah is another way to connect with God. And that takes us to where we're holding. And dear friends, it's 8:29 p.m. With that, we hopefully rather quickly and hopefully clearly, you see where we're heading to in Tanya. We're holding at the end of chapter 4. Next class, not next week, in 2 weeks. The Monday after Rosh Hashanah, we'll be right back here in person or on Zoom. And we're going to continue inside. We're going to finish chapter 4 and march on to chapter 5. And at this point, let's talk, let's discuss if we have questions. There's a lot of discussion this morning. And before we do that, I just want to wish all of you a Shana Tova. As we traditionally greet each other, you should have a ksiva, a chasima tova, lashana tova umasuka, may be inscribed and sealed for a good, happy, healthy, and sweet new year for us, for all the Jewish people. May be a year of good news for all of us personally and all of us collectively. Amen. And I look forward to another year, a wonderful year together of learning, of joy, of connecting. I want to thank you all for joining. And with that,
Everyone.
we'll see you all soon. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks for having the
Thank
class.